Hello everyone, my name is Paula. Welcome to Mindalia TV livestream, where thousands of people around the world gather daily to watch the interviews and talks organized by Mindalia TV. In this occasion, we have TV host, entrepreneur, and CEO consultant, and also president of Wisdom for Kids, Angel Rebo, conducting an interview to Marie Platske. Marie is an award-winning leadership expert and a #1 best-selling author of 6 books. Marie creates high-performing leaders, coaching business professionals around the globe. She uses her federal law enforcement journey before and after 9/11 to demonstrate what exceptional leaders do differently, sharing how vulnerability and leadership is critical to being a leader worth following. But right before we welcome our guest, I would like to remind you all that Mindalia TV is a nonprofit organization, and our main goals are to help spread human knowledge and to promote planetary solidarity by all means. And if you want to help Mindalia help the world, there are a few things that you can do. One of them would be to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Mindalia TV. Another, give us a like or leave a positive comment down below this video. Please know that with these actions, you're helping us reach even more people around the world who can benefit from the content of our channel. Also, to allow your live interaction, remember there's a chat on the side of your screen, and you can use it to ask all the questions that you would like to our guest, who will kindly answer to them by the end of the interview. It is time now to welcome Angel Rebo and Marie Platske. Thank you guys for being with us today.
Thank you, Paula. Thank you very much. And Marie, it's a pleasure, big one, big time, to have you with us on Mindalia TV tonight. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Angel. You have such a special place in my heart that this is truly an honor. It's truly an honor.
You.
And I'm sure it's going to be a lot of fun too.
Absolutely. First question that comes like that I wanted to ask you tonight, Marie, is why is it not easy to be followed?
Ooh. Why is it not easy to be followed? Well, you know what? I think it's that there's 2 things that come to mind with this. One is the world has so much going on, right? There are a lot of voices out there vying for people's attention. And whether those voices are in media or they come from family or work commitments, there's just a lot of pulls on people's attentions. So oftentimes it can be easier to not be seen and heard than to be seen or heard. That's one piece. And the other piece is that depending on family upbringings or backgrounds, for some people, not being seen and not being heard is part of the DNA of how they're wired. I spoke to someone today who said, I was always told that if I speak up, that's a form of arrogance. And so this idea that she doesn't have a voice, that's worthy of being heard, or if it's spoken up, that it means that there's, being a braggart or being arrogant. And that has some people retract and pull back and not share their brilliance. So I believe that those are 2 of the biggest reasons why it's easier to not be heard.
And do you think that in organizations, leaders have to, let's say, mid-size, large organizations,
mm-hmm.
Do you think that you have to necessarily be arrogant to be able to lead those organizations?
No, I think you've known me long enough to know that. Yeah, absolutely not. And yet that story can get in the way with positioning to say, if I do speak up and if I do share my accomplishments, that there is an element that I will be perceived as arrogance. Like I said, culturally, for some people, this is difficult. And I have learned that if you take humanity or vulnerability and you marry that with experience, with the things that you do and your accomplishments, it doesn't come across as arrogant. It comes across as human. It comes across as confident. It comes across as incredibly wise and not arrogant at all. Because, you know, certainly arrogance isn't something that's going to win you many friends or allow you to influence people.
It's so funny. Actually, you know, I formulated the question in a way that, you know, it could be taken in different ways. And obviously I was not referring to you. That you was, you know, so I'm going to ask you a different question. When you talk to organizations,
Mm-hmm.
you know, when you are being, you know, firsthand witness of how organizations work,
Mm-hmm.
would you say that someone, for being arrogant, is having more chances to be successful leading that organization in
I would
particular?
not. No, I would not. And the reason why is because, you know, leadership is influence. And in order to influence people in a way that's positive and have them want to follow you, especially when you're talking about those mid-sized to larger organizations where there are many employees that are, you know, considered the followers of the vision, if you will, that researchers show, you know, I like the work of Jim Kouzes and Barry Posner when they talk about the four most important qualities in a leader. And they speak about integrity as number one, and number two being forward thinking. And when you identify that and you say, well, would somebody who is of high integrity or somebody who's forward thinking, you know, would they have a high degree or a high propensity to arrogance? And the answer is no. It would be possible for that to be part of it. However, not to attract the largest degree of followers or for people to stay in the organization and to thrive. And I think that we're seeing that more and more in organizations that have higher retention versus those who struggle with keeping people, because there's a cost for that, right? For when people leave and there's turnover, and that can happen at any level in the organization. And there's a, you know, a financial bottom line cost to having people leave because of that.
And what would you say your experience has been? Because obviously you do a lot of things. I mean, you really help people in many different ways. What does your experience tell you about how to make sure that you lead people the right way?
Well, you know, it's a great question because, you know, leading somebody the right way is part art and part science, right? It's both. There's the component of your own alignment with your values and your authenticity and who it is that you are as a human being. And I've noticed in going into an organization that leaders who are really clear about who they are and who they're not, and they're able to articulate that in a way, are able to enlist people in whatever it is their vision in moving forward. And yet that piece, you know, that inner alignment or those core values, you know, is only one part. There's also, you know, what many people will speak about, which is the emotional intelligence. And when you look at, you know, the intellectual capacity, you know, and that alignment, you also need the component of emotional intelligence. And while research will show that 90%, you know, that high 90 percentile, that it makes such a difference when we're moving up in an organization in order to be effective, I've witnessed that personally with leaders who were incredibly emotionally intelligent and those who were not, and how it can get in the way and sabotage the success of the organization as well as the team and the you know, individual players, even if on their own they're amazing. If they're working with a highly non-emotionally intelligent leader, you know, their genius seems to leave them as well.
Who is typically, what would you say is the profile of the people that you like to serve the most, Lisa Marie?
Profile?
Yeah, like, you know, is it a particular type of person? Is it, what would you say?
Well, I love it because it's not a demographic.
Okay.
It is not a demographic. I don't have a, age 35 to 55, working in this size company. For me, the genius in the work in leadership with allowing people to be seen and heard and recognized and rewarded for their own brilliance without having to change who they are is really about finding people who are mission driven, regardless of the size or the industry. I mean, I've worked in motorsports, law, healthcare, real estate. You name the type of organization. So it's not even whether or not the type of industry. It has to be the uniqueness of the leader and whether or not they're open to a positive change in behavior, and whether or not they're truly willing to be in a in conversation to examine, like I say, that inner alignment with who they are as a leader, and then how that's showing up and affecting the people that they're actually leading. Because, without starting here, it's very difficult to lead others. I have to first figure out how to lead myself. And I will share with you, Angel, that this comes from a place for me that I wasn't always good at that, so I had to, when I was on my own journey of going, okay, so like what's not working, it wasn't an external process or a technical aptitude. It was, hello, let's try figuring out how to lead her, and then she can then turn and help others. And I think that, for many people, when something's broken, there's a tendency to look externally. It's like, well, what's the outside thing that's not working? And yet it's so rarely the outside thing.
And is everybody willing to be fully led in organizations?
Are there people, or are there leaders?
Is everybody willing to be led?
No, not at all.
And what can a leader do?
Not at all. Well, I think that one of the things that's important is that if you're a leader, you also want to be a good follower, because following is as important as leading. It doesn't mean that because you're the person who's the leader that you're always the leader. There were times when I was the person who was in charge of perhaps some sort of operation in law enforcement, or perhaps the supervisor or manager of something. And there was someone else who had a genius to lead in an area that just wasn't my expertise. And so in that case, it was in my best interest to become the follower and to learn from them. And so great leaders understand when it's time to step up and lead, and when it's also their place to follow. It's both. And great leaders do that incredibly well. And to you asked the question about, well, what if it's somebody doesn't want to lead, what doesn't want to follow, you're setting out that. And for me, when I would experience that, as an individual in working, it was, okay, so what am I doing? So are they not buying into my vision? Are they, is it that there's something that I've done that isn't in alignment? Is there something that's not inspiring about where it is that I'm sharing is the destination? And so for me, I always point the finger back to, what is it that I could do better that would allow them to be enrolled and enlisted in the desire to follow wherever the destination is. And some people are gonna fight you on it, right? Some people are going to. However, I think that it's beautiful to be able to then do the self-examination and say, wow, I have a role and a responsibility here to see, have I done everything that I possibly could for this person to see the vision that I have, and to be able to move in it. A lot of responsibility in leadership.
Exactly. In the beginning of the conversation, changing subjects a little bit, you talked about your heart. and thank you for your kind comment. But what does your heart tell you about where the world is going today?
Ooh. Well, what does my heart tell me? My heart tells me that there are good people everywhere. My heart tells me that there are brilliant and amazing people who simply haven't been given permission to step out and have a voice. I have the belief that there are cures to just about everything. It's just that not everybody has fully stepped into their mission or their calling or their purpose to go out and do whatever it is that they're called to do. And so therefore, when there is suffering or when there is something that isn't working, it's not that there is not a solution out there that somebody has. They just haven't necessarily felt that they've had permission to go out and speak about it. And so I believe that there are good people in the world, very good people. And I find them everywhere that I go and travel to. And, that's what my heart tells me about where we are in the world today.
We share a little bit of responsibility in that area of leading people. And what you just said is so true. So how do you think that us as leaders, how can we do a better job in order to be able to actually, gather all these amazing, good people that have so many amazing life purposes and great skills and abilities and gifts, and help them bloom and help them help so many people that need it so much?
It's a great question. Very, very thoughtful and insightful, Angel. So thank you. And what really comes up for me with that is the idea of safety. And what I mean by that is, once again, you're most likely familiar with Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And for anybody who's watching, if that's not something you're familiar with, in the hierarchy of needs, there are basic needs that have to be met in order for us to climb up through the ladder of reaching the pinnacle or self-actualization. And at the very, very, basic part of survival needs is safety. And if someone doesn't feel safe to share, to speak up, to have a voice, to move into their mission or their purpose, they won't go any further. And so I believe that, first and foremost, it's the responsibility of people who are already in a leadership position to create a safe space, a forum, much like Mindalia, where you can share and give voice to something that would be of benefit to all. And then the other part is that if we look at the hierarchy of needs, it goes up to, okay, so then once that's met, then what happens? Well, then people have to be able to, have their needs of food and shelter met in order for them to actually ever even move into, oh my gosh, I have a mission, I have a purpose, I have something unique. And so, when I meet people, and I meet people who are doing things like yourself that are amazing in the world and really have something that's truly calling them, like they're not pushed by fear. There's this vision that's actually pulling them forth and allowing them to want to do something, bigger and better for the world. Those basic pieces have already been met. And then there's also been what I call access, that kind of comes up a little bit higher. And while Maslow doesn't describe it, access is, I open doors for you, you open doors for me. And those doors are ones that are already they allow those who, to give voice to the voiceless, if you will. It's access to community and connection and opportunity that you otherwise wouldn't have. And one of the reasons why I've done the work in nonprofits or mentoring or sat on boards in organizations where it was serving a population that was, disadvantaged in some way, it was ultimately for that, to provide access, to provide safety, and to provide resources that were truly about, giving voice to. So just so, so many pieces that are tied to the fundamental safety need, where if I don't feel protected, I'm not going to speak up. I'm not going to share, what it is that I think would be done or could be done. And so I for me, that's so important. That's so important, is to start there and then see, and to see where someone is in moving up. And that's that, the foundational support to actually be able to get to the self-actualization or making a difference on the planet.
How good of a job do you think that we do as parents leading our kids today?
It's that's a question as far as a big question for me to answer as someone who doesn't have children. And what I'll share that I've really learned is that for me, as someone who doesn't have children and has lots of clients who are single moms, who have been single dads and raised children by themselves, and just grandparents who've raised children, and had a lot of people in my circle where I've, through either coaching or one of my programs, are in parenting. The degree of responsibility, we go back to that in today's world, to lead a generation. It's massive. And when I look at my own, my mom and my experience being raised by a single mom where I called the police regularly for domestic violence, and, had called the police in multiple households for something that was going on that was quite devastating. When I look at that, do I say, oh, was it more devastating for me than what's going on today? And I look at it and say, it's not. You can't compare. It's an individual experience. So to go back to your question about how well, our parents preparing, how is the parenting as far as the leadership? I believe it always goes down to the individual and also the community in which the child is surrounded in, and whether that's external family or whether community at large. For me, that's one of the differences that I see today, is that there's such an unfortunate situation with many people wanting to be hands off for fear of being judged, sued, or involved, that there is less of that community aspect. And once again, like I say, I'm not a parent, so I don't want to be here as the expert on that. It's just that from an outsider's view, in watching these women and men do this on their own, I know for me that there was a lot more voices that I had to pay attention to as a child, because if I did anything, my mom would find out, or my grandparents, and there was going to be hell to pay. And in today's world, it appears that my clients have been more on their own to do more, because there's less of the community surrounding them. And that's just from an outsider standpoint.
Awesome. What is that thing that you're most passionate about, Lisa Marie?
I'm most passionate about people designing their destiny and getting to live a life where they don't have to change who they are. They understand that who they are is perfect and divinely designed, and that they can do absolutely anything that they want without having to change who they are. And a big part of that is that I get to work with these leaders who don't feel that they can be seen or heard or recognized and rewarded for that authentic version of who they are. And I just completely disagree, and so passionate about this that at my annual event, Angel, this woman shared, who had been an executive in Nike, and she shared, this is the first training that I've ever been to where I was told that it was okay to be who I was. There was nothing to fix. There was nothing to prove. There was nothing to do, and that I could actually lead this way. And that for me is is so passionate, because we're all different and it's all wonderful. And there's not a specific formula or box that I can give someone to say, this is what it looks like to be a leader, because how you lead, how I lead, they're different and both wonderful, and both speak to a specific audience at a specific time. And there's no better than, or it's just different.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you so much. I was thinking about all these people that you help, identify what their destiny is and act upon it. Would some examples, besides the one that you just mentioned, would there be other examples that would come to your mind that would be specific, especially, I'm sure all of them are special, but anything in particular that comes to your mind right now?
Oh, absolutely. It's just story upon story upon story. I have a client right now at the end of this month. She's retiring, and she's retiring, way, way, way early. She's nowhere near 65 or 62. And she had come to me a couple years ago, we've been coaching together, and she's, had said, I want you to help me. I love this business that I'm doing, and I just don't see how I can do it without, on my own. And so, we worked on that. And last year she quadrupled the money that she was making and said, I'm going to retire this year, but it was supposed to be at the end of the year. And then she realized that we had done a lot of work this year on her focusing on one thing. I always say it's one thing. A lot of people get told do lots of things in business, and it's the one thing that's your genius. And by focusing on that, she now gets to retire at the end of this month. And she's replaced her full-time income. And that to me is just exquisite. And one of my clients wanted to spend time, a whole, summers, all summer long with her two kids. She didn't want to go to work. She didn't want to have to run her business. She wanted things to just be taken care of and to have enough money to do that. And so, that's one of the things that we did, and her being able to be seen and heard and recognized and attract the big opportunities that she deserves. And so, she's got two kids, and the best thing is that she's been creating memories. It's not about all the money or the contracts. It's about, the memories. And the same thing with the client who retired. It's about the difference that she gets to make in the world, and what it is that she's doing to make the world a better place. And, and I can even think about, there's an executive that, spent time with me a couple months ago, and it was just, her and I, and we're in conversation, and she said, I realized that I have been saying, I want you to help me with this promotion. I want you to help me with this promotion. And the reality is that promotion is just way too small. And so the reason why it hasn't is because I am supposed to be leading an organization. It is not about me moving up to the next executive level. It is that I am supposed to be the CEO of the organization. And, that level of clarity, and then what that has opened indoors, she had an opportunity to do that. And she called me up and said, I'm not taking it. And I said, why? And she said, because I recognize that I deserve more. And once again, not tied to, certain trappings or financial, but to say, I have this genius and I know that if I do it in this organization versus something global that could make a difference, I touch more lives. And so I could just give you like lots of client stories because they're exciting. You know, they're really exciting.
Oh, beautiful.
Making a difference.
We're going to go to the Q&A now, but before that, before we do that, I mean, time flies with you, Lisa Marie. You know that. How can we find you? How can our audience on Mindalia TV find you?
Find me. I'm not that hard to find.
Okay, good.
So my website is upsidethinking.com, UPSIDE, and the word thinking.com. And I'm on all social media platforms. However, I love LinkedIn. I think LinkedIn is exquisite. And so that's a great place to find me at Lisa Marie Platske. And one other thing is that, Angel, I am someone who is a personal connector. I like people. I like one-on-one conversation. And not everybody's a big forum person. So my email is lisamarie@upsidethinking.com. So in the event that someone wants to find me, and you know, there's another way to do it.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much. Let's go to the questions. All right. So first question says, when you quit, hold on a second. Let me make sure I'm reading it well. Yeah. Did you have to unlearn some leadership skills when you quit the law enforcement world? That's an interesting question.
It's a great question. It's a great question. Well, law enforcement in itself was a huge learning for me. And so did I learn leadership skills after I left law enforcement?
Unlearn. Did you have to unlearn?
Unlearn. Oh, unlearn. Oh, unlearn. I would say no, I did not. I did not have to unlearn. When I was in law enforcement, there was a time where, oh gosh, Angel, I was probably, a couple of years on the job, and I realized things weren't going well. Like, it's probably my, second, third year on the job, not going well. Like, just the assignments were difficult. Guys didn't want to work with me. And I knew I had to do something about it. And this is the reason why I've become so passionate about leadership, is because leadership really ultimately saved my life. And I knew that there was something that wasn't working. And so I signed up for a leadership course and attended this leadership course it was a 7-month course that I had to go to on weekends. And when I was in the class, they gave me assessments, 360 assessments, where your boss and subordinates all rate you, and interpersonal skills assessments and personality, you name it. And when I had taken one of the interpersonal skills assessments, I got the results back, and the instructor announced to the class that I was a 0.
Wow.
And yeah, wow. Still, it's still, very painful. Mm-hmm. And she went on further and said, if Lisa invites you to do something and you show up, she doesn't really want you to be there. And if you invite her to do something and she shows up, she's secretly wishing she was someplace else.
Wow.
And it wasn't a safe place for me to receive this. And like I said, it's still painful today. What I realized in that moment is I had a conversation. I drove home. I was in tears. I was a mess. And it took me a few weeks, but I recognized, if I don't learn how to connect, if I didn't learn how to be able to be seen at work and recognized for what I brought by the guys that I worked with, that I might be smart and tough. I might be incredibly strong, but I would be alone and dead. And that, for me, led me down the path of learning about deepening my connection to leadership, connection, alignment with myself, how to lead me before I could lead others, how to position my expertise. That's why I was the fastest promoted officer. And so to have to unlearn even more so, it was about diving deeper, because what allowed me to open my business and get clients almost immediately, in fact, my first contract was a $50,000 contract, was because I understood how to connect and how to position my expertise. So law enforcement was a brilliant teacher. And there were a lot of things that I did wrong, right? There were a lot of things that were more about me getting out of my own way, because I was so bent on, it turned out to be a great thing that happened to me despite how painful it was, because, I always tell people I learned then how to expand my vocabulary. I learned 3 words. I don't know, versus trying to prove that I was right, and so I walk away with all of those lessons that made me a better person. So a great question, because, there's so much about law enforcement that for some people is triggering. And yet for me, I walked away with so many gifts, and loved the experience.
Thank you. Next question. I have a small group of people under my lead, and sometimes I fail on meeting their expectations. How can I achieve that? What are your thoughts on that?
Ooh, that's a great question. That's a great question. And 2 things come to mind. One is the regular meetings. I would have regular meetings with my employees, my team, and sit down and say, here's what it is that I expect. Here's what the consequences are. And what is it that you see that you expect? What do you expect in return from me ultimately? And, what do you see as the consequences if I don't deliver, right? And so there was this awareness, where we both were in conversation every week. And then when I would meet with them for their monthly reviews, what I would say is, how did you do? How did I do? And what can we do to improve? And those were 3 questions I used to ask all the time. And then, the other piece to this is that whenever at any time I would fail to do something that I said that I would do, it was almost immediate for me to say, I'm sorry, please forgive me. Here's how I let you down. And here is what I am going to do to ensure that this doesn't happen again. And the expectation wasn't that I was perfect. The expectation was that my word meant something, that I am my word. And if I don't honor it, at some point, then people just don't believe you. And for me, being in where there's safety, where somebody's got your back and you're armed and that's pretty darn important, So I'm hoping that those 2 pieces, the meetings with those questions, and then the second thing is the acknowledgement of when something doesn't.
Perfect.
Thank you, Angel.
No, thank you. Next question. What are the keys to become a successful leader in our society?
Keys to become a successful leader in our society. Well, I think it's really anywhere. And I have 7 pillars of leadership that I speak about at my annual Design Your Destiny live conference. And there are 7 pillars of leadership that I believe are important. They're ones that I researched. And so I'll share them briefly. One is to and by the way, just, they all begin with P's. So there's a P word in each of them. So just so that you can follow along. And so the first one is to start with a written plan and begin with the end in mind. And so I found that great leaders really have a very clear plan that's written down. It's not typed out. It's not scribbled. It's actually written. It can be 1 or 2 sentences, but it's a written plan that says, because a plan doesn't have to be pages and pages. It can be just a few sentences that says, this is where it is that I'm going, and here's where it is I'm going to end up. That's ultimately what it says. And then the second piece, in order to be successful, what great leaders do is that they understand their personality. They understand how their personality both helps and hinders their plan. There are things that I do in just who I am that allow me to move forward. And there are things that hold me back more than anybody else ever could, or any other circumstance. And that understanding means that you then have to surround yourself with the people who can fill in the gaps. And so there's a great understanding. And as I was doing these interviews, I saw that beautifully. The third pillar is to be able to create powerful partnerships. And partnerships come from connection. Once you know how to connect and deeply connect with someone, you're able to then enter into a potential partnership where you ultimately, it's not formal. It's just something where, the two of you look out for each other. I'm always looking out for opportunities for you, Angel. I mean, your name comes up. I'm thinking when somebody talks about youth, when somebody's talking about entrepreneurship, when someone's talking about, being able to make a difference, your name is spinning through my head. I believe that we have a partnership. And that partnership isn't something that we've ever written down on paper. It's just something that, based on the connection that I value and love and trust you, that there is that. And so that's the third one. The fourth one is to live your priorities. If you are not clear and don't establish non-negotiables in your life, and what I find is that sometimes leaders don't, you can end up someplace that you didn't expect to be. A great story of that, of Mr. El Arian, who used to worked for one of the largest financial companies and managed billions of dollars. And when his daughter wrote a letter to him saying, here are the 21 life events that you missed out on me by the age of, she was 8 or 9. Please don't quote me on that. It's just that if you can miss out on things that are most important. And I don't have an attachment to what a priority is or not. I've had clients who've said, I'm going to miss my daughter's wedding because this business deal is so important. As long as you understand there's a consequence, and as you understand that you're clear with your priorities are and you're able to live them, every yes equals no and every no equals yes. So understand where you're putting your time. The fifth one is being able to create a meaningful and memorable presence. This is your leadership presence, and that's positioning, and positioning falls under there. And so does the element of gratitude and truly being present in the moment. And then number 6 is evaluate your priorities. Evaluate your progress. And that's all about profit and actually going back and understanding the metrics that you're using. And the 7th one is investing in personal and professional development, doing some sort of investment and regular investment in yourself. And when you look at those 7 pieces, what it takes to lead successfully, what I have found is that great leaders have all of these and they've mastered them. They don't dabble in them. They're not just good in them. They've mastered them. And that all of the elements of emotional intelligence and integrity and forward thinking and being inspiring and being someone who's competent all fall in those pieces in different ways. So I believe that those 7 pillars really capture, what it takes to be a successful leader worth following.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing so much. It was really fascinating. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Next question. I have to confess, I'm not sure if I understand it, but as you talk about safety before, I'm just going to leave it as it is. Isn't the idea of unsafety an illusion in most cases?
Isn't the idea of unsafety?
Unsafety, exactly.
Unsafety, of not being safe, an illusion. Isn't the idea of not being safe an illusion? That's an interesting question. And I would say that for me, the idea of not being safe being an illusion, is really a fascinating question, because, Angel, I will tell you that I'm committed to mercy and justice and protection. And there have been many times in my life where I have not felt safe, in conversations, where there was emotional sabotage, in situations. I can think of one, where I was in a, I didn't think I was going to make it out alive. This is when I was in Ethiopia and was visiting a sponsor child, and there happened to be a political coup going on, and I was just in the middle of town in the wrong place at the wrong time, and then just so many other situations that, wow, that's one for me that's like, no, it feels very real to feel unsafe and to feel safe. I mean, very, very real. It's not something that's just been in my mind. It's been the times when somebody's had something pressed up against my back. And it's been the times when, I don't know that there's any more to say on that. I think that for me, it's felt very real.
Thank you. Next question. What is the correct way to influence our community?
And that's an interesting word, the correct way. So it's a really interesting word, because for me, it's like, with words like that, I'm always, correct. As somebody who's perfect in my imperfections, I don't know that I always do. I don't know that I always do correct, Angel. But great question, in the sense, like, how do you be an influence in your community? And we've talked a bit about it with regards to the integrity piece and being someone who is your word. Who is your word. However, when you speak about I don't say however, and when you speak about influence is leadership, and leadership is influence. And so if you're someone who has somebody's ear, when you're speaking, you're the person who they ultimately will hopefully listen to and follow. And so when I think about, okay, if I want to do something in a community, it's like, how do I get the message out so as many people hear that within the community, so that it can actually make a difference? And I look at it as, it goes back to the foundational piece for me, which is the who am I being, first off, and is who I'm being the same in my personal life as it is in my community life, as it is in my work life, that I would be somebody that people would be comfortable, following. Like, is there that alignment and that integrity in the what I'm saying? And then the next piece to that is my clarity of thought, what it is that I feel is really important to be said, something that anybody, regardless of their educational background, where they are, would they be able to consume it and understand it? And it's why sometimes I always say, like, I have kids speak, right? So sometimes there's language of research and stuff, but sometimes my language is just kind of, it's kids speak, because it shouldn't be so filled with big words that people can't understand it. I find myself, there's been certain speakers where I'm like, I have to get out my Google dictionary to understand what's going on. So is there clarity of thought, and can people follow whatever it is that you're going to say? Because if you want to be an influencer, you want to first make sure that you're somebody that people would be willing to follow. And then you want to make sure that your message is so crystal clear. And then, the next step, as I look at, if we were looking at this as more of a linear process, would be, who is it that I know that I could enlist in helping me get this message out? And I'll give you an example. I remember I was involved in a Chamber of Commerce, and I've been involved in several. And this one particular Chamber of Commerce, I sat on a board for this committee, and before the meeting, there was something very important that I wanted done in the community. And so I went and I spoke to 3 different people in the room. And I said, I'm going to say this. And when I say that, what I want you to say is, that sounds like a great idea. That's what I said to one of them. And then I said something different to the other one and something different. So when I said this, one of the people spoke up and said, that's a great idea. And then somebody else spoke up and says, yeah, I think we should look at that. And then a third person said that. And then by that, the whole room was like, that's a great idea. And so, isn't that funny? You know, so it's like you need to have people who are your champions of whatever it is. So it's not like, let's say in a community, you know, you had 100,000 people or 1 million people that you wanted to influence. You don't have to have all those people. You do want to have a few key voices, and they don't have to be the loudest voices, and they don't even have to say a whole lot. They just simply have to be the voices in the right place to be able to support whatever it is that you're looking to affect change within a community. And then there are other components to when you get media involved and other pieces. But I think that question was so interesting because of the word correct, because I'm not 100% sure that I'm correct. However, that's the answer that really, speaks from my soul as to what it is that I've done. So thanks for asking.
Thank you. Do you use any type of visualization work?
Do I use any? Say it again.
Any type of visualization.
Oh,
work.
Sure. Any type of visualization. Yeah, absolutely. However, I don't, let me be real specific. I believe in having a morning ritual or process. And I ask myself questions like, what is it that I want to have happen today? How is it that I want to leave the end of the day, celebrating, or what do I want the experience to be? And so I feel those and experience those in the morning. Is it a deep 30-minute meditation visualization? Absolutely not. There are 2 to 3 times a week where I go to daily mass, and I, in the middle of the day at 12 o'clock, go to church, and it's quiet, and I sit for mass and I say prayers there, and it's in the middle of the day. And so it's an interruption between the morning and the first half and the second half of the day. And it allows me to ground myself and be present to what's important. And then at the end of the day, I'm reviewing. Research shows that when you visualize something like throwing the basketball in the hoop, it's as powerful as actually practicing putting it in. So I believe in the power of visualization. I've read the research and I understand it. And I have friends who do deep meditation practices and visualization practices. And for me, what I find is that because I'm always on the move, that if I do this in sort of segments of digestible, time frames versus me sitting and visualizing something it doesn't suit my personality and who I am. So I have this morning practice, this afternoon practice, and this evening practice that allow me to see what it is that I want and to stay the course.
Wow, beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Look at that. We have a reader of your book and says, thank you, Lisa Marie, for your amazing books. What's the most important pillar to leadership?
Ooh, you want me to pick one?
Exactly.
Oh, that's hard. That's really hard. Most important pillar is the pillar that you struggle with the most. That's the most important, right? Because there are times in my life where, understanding my personality was like, oh my gosh, you mean I do that, or you mean that shows up because I'm someone who doesn't like all the details. And so someone would ask me for details and it'd be like, oh my gosh, you know, and then recognizing how that can get in the way of contracts or, you know, explanations with people. And so there was a time for me to really work on that and then develop a team around that. And then there have been other times in my business and in my personal life where creating powerful partnerships is really where, you know, it was the most important place for me to spend my time. However, if I wouldn't have had a plan, understanding where I was going, the partnerships wouldn't have done me, you know, as much good. It was only where I spent the time on that. And so even now, what I recognize is, there's an emphasis on the partnerships for me, and there's an a huge emphasis on evaluation, because I've been paying more attention to whether or not my processes are working. And I realized that I had gotten lax. And so this year I had a huge misstep earlier in the year, and it made me question everything about whether I should be in business. And it was just simply a process. It was simply that I had stopped looking and evaluating and thought, I got this, you know, this is good. And so those 7 pillars, they're not linear. They're more about what's missing in a particular moment. And so much like that earlier question where the person said, well, what's the, you know, what could a leader do to be effective in today's world, you know, and it's that total package, you know, it's the total piece. And sometimes one of those is missing or weaker based on, you know, circumstances. So it's the one that's the biggest struggle for you in the moment. That's the most important.
Okay, fantastic. That's the last, it's going to be the last question now. And actually it comes from me. And that's definitely a question I want to ask you, which is, how can we do it so that young kids, start designing their own destiny today?
What a great question. And, you know, I wish that I had understood that, you know, in its full, you know, its full possibility when I was a kid, when I was growing up. And, you know, I believe that the most valuable gift that I have received in taking this journey is understanding that that failure is okay, and that failure is my friend. And so when you're on the path to design your destiny, just like a roller coaster would be less exciting if it only had ups and no downs, life is kind of the same way. It's just that most people figure that, or envision that at some point they'll arrive and there'll only be the highs and there'll never be the lows. And if you're designing your destiny, there's no way to get it right 100% of the time. No matter how good something is, there's always the down, and that's okay. And so I had to learn how to befriend failure and how to find that the worst experiences in life were the best teachers. And once I understood that, I understood that there wasn't anything that I could do and I couldn't fail, because everything was happening for my greatest good. Everything was in divine right timing, perfect timing for me. And so whatever decision I made, whether it was to go to the right or to go to the left, or whether it was to go straight, it was the right one. And it could be worked out perfectly, because there are these different universes all happening simultaneously with different choices to lead us to the ultimate perfection in designing our own destiny. So there's not a way to get it wrong, no matter how much you feel that you either succeeded or failed. There's always another up, another down, another twist, another turn, another opportunity in this beautiful tapestry of life. And I think that if every child understood that they were actually perfect right where they were, regardless of their circumstances, regardless of their financial means, regardless of how gorgeous they were or how much money their parents had in their bank account or didn't have in their bank account. It doesn't really matter, that they are designed for greatness. They are designed to succeed. They are hardwired for success, regardless of what path they take.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Lisa Marie. Before we go, could you please remind us again of, how can we get in touch with you and of the great work that you do every single day, please?
Sure. Upsidethinking.com is the name of my company, UPSIDE, and the word thinking.com all smushed together. And LinkedIn is my favorite social media platform. And you can also email me if you have any additional questions at lisamarie@upsidethinking.com.
Fantastic. Well, it's been a big, massive pleasure to have you with us.
And the same. Today. Just have such a special place in my heart. I just love you, Angel. So you're so lucky to have you here.
Thank you. I love you too. And I'm sure that all the audience in Mindalia TV has fallen in love with you today. So, thank you for contributing so much and for helping so many people and using us as a conduit tonight. So thank you. And again, this is Angel Rebo with Mindalia TV. Thank you very much for being with us today, and see you soon in our next interview. Have a wonderful evening. Bye-bye.